question, we move on to item number 4, River Stream Corridor Protection District recommendations from the Planning Commission. Josh, I'll let you give us a little bit of history on that one and tell us what that's really all about.
In the April Planning Commission meeting, they had a brief discussion on the River Stream Corridor Protection District. And a motion was made to recommend that the Board of Commissioners study stream buffers and consider alignment with the state-imposed widths. There was a second and a vote. And the vote was 3-2 with 6 members present, and the chairman abstained from the vote, so the motion passed. And I'm bringing forward that message. There wasn't a whole lot to the discussion, but that was the ending motion.
Reiterate that motion again.
The motion was to recommend that the Board of Commissioners study stream buffers and consider alignment with the state-imposed widths.
So the recommendation, as a result of 3-2 vote, is for the Board of Commissioners to study stream buffers and consider alignment with the state-imposed widths.
I wasn't present for the meeting, but I do have a voice recording of it, and that was verbatim the motion that was made and voted on and understood by everybody.
Can you specify those widths? Do you know what the widths are? Can you specify that to the board?
I do. Well, it's important to understand that there's
Well,
several different
yeah,
things
I know
involved
that.
with the policy. That, you know, there's the widths where the buffer applies, and then what applies within that buffer is also something to consider, and it's different all the way around. It's hard to compare the local policy with state
Well,
policy.
let me explain what the buffers are. If you have a creek or river that does not flow into your water system, then you've got this buffer. You've got one that flows into the water system, you've got a different buffer, which is a lot wider. Now, is that leave anything out?
I'd just be a little more specific with terminology. The state
How about
buffer,
repeat it?
the state buffer applies to intermittent and perennial streams.
Which is what? How wide?
And it's 25 feet on either side of the perennial stream from the point of rested vegetation. 25 feet is about partially the width of this room.
In which it specifies where the creek is. On your book, it says from the top of the bank, which could be another 100 feet. If you understand what I'm saying, or if you got a flat bottom, creek bottom, then your regulation says from the top of the bank, which the top of the bank could be another 100 feet each way if it goes through a flat area. So it really, you really don't know where it is for your regulation.
Well, we know where it is.
What the water, now, what he's saying is where you need to do it, in my opinion. Because that way you know where it is.
What did you say, Josh?
I was just responding to that we do know where it is. The local policy is only applies to perennial streams, not to intermittent streams. And it uses a stream order called the Stourdevant stream order. Headwaters of perennial streams, first order. When 2 first order streams come together, it becomes a second order. When 2 second order streams come together, it becomes a third order. And we use those orders to apply different widths. First and second order streams, it's 75 feet on each side of the stream. And you're right, it's from different points, not from the point of
Where's
rested.
that definition again? Where the rested,
Well, the state is from rested vegetation.
the rested vegetation, you need that, in my opinion, what they use to the top bank, the top bank could be another 100 feet each way. If you go through a flat area.
And for
Do
third order,
you agree with that? You know what I'm saying?
I do. Let me finish explaining what the policy is currently, just to make sure everybody has the same understanding. And for third order and higher perennial streams, it's 150 feet on each side of the stream. or the width of the floodplain as identified in the floodplain, by FEMA.
The 150 feet is not a state limit.
No,
No.
I was just explaining local policy.
Yeah, that's local policy. 25 feet is your state buffer,
On all three streams?
basically, except for the trout stream, they're 50 feet. Anything that flows into a water, like the Crawford water, anything I believe is within a 7-mile radius, has to be wider. But other than that, that's it. And we're in a rural county, we're not downtown all night. We got 14,000 people in this county, we got 414 square miles. Gwinnett County's got 412 square miles, and they got over 800,000 people, and the buffers are way beyond what Gwinnett requires. So I don't mind protecting the stream, but we don't need to go overboard because it condemns our land.
What is allowed in the buffer?
That's the other point that was made with the planning commission meeting, and that, you can still farm it, you still timber it, you still build your home there.
Not because of the state regulations, you cannot build a home in there, but the state thing to do.
You can
The
build a
state
home,
regular overrides the county. So you can't do that.
What
you can
what
build
is
a home.
the county buffer? What is the restriction on the county buffer?
you can build a home within the county buffer under a certain set of conditions, single-family home,
But see, the state overrides that, you can't.
within the
So-
25.
Now, check that out and verify that and make them satisfied, but I think I'm right.
But if the buffer was, if the county imposed buffer wasn't there, the state law would apply? Is that what you're
No,
talking about?
no, just the opposite. The state overrides the county. In other words, if you're saying you can build a house in the buffer, state say you can't build it.
But if it's a county buffer, and the buffer went away, and now all of a sudden it's just a state buffer, where the county buffer used to be, are you saying that where the county buffer used to be, the state would allow you if we didn't have a county buffer there?
Well, you got me confused, I don't think you're saying it quite right, but what I'm saying is the state has a 25-foot buffer.
And you cannot build a home on
You
that.
cannot build a home in that, can't put septic tank, anything else. Okay, if you come along and say you can, you can't.
Yeah, we know you can't infringe upon the state's buffer. I mean,
Still got to abide by the state.
But in Oglethorpe County's buffer, what can you do in Oglethorpe? We're talking about Oglethorpe County, but we can't do anything about the state buffer. I mean, we can't reduce that. We
But,
can,
and I agree with that, but that's what I'm trying to explain to you.
yeah, but what we're talking about, what Josh was explaining to me, and I think the rest of the board, was what could happen inside of the buffer that Oglethorpe County has imposed, not the state, because we know we can't change that. Didn't you tell us that you could build a house inside of the Oglethorpe County?
That's correct, that's correct, and I can't
Buffer
confirm.
maybe 75 feet. The county may have a 75-foot buffer,
Yeah,
right?
but you can't technically build in it anyway, because you got to function, check that thing uphill, because you're always downhill next to the creek. So, you could do that and pump it uphill, for a second tank, but I mean,
So you told us what we can do inside that buffer, what can't you do inside that buffer?
Well, one of the things is quarries.
That's the state buffer, what you're talking
Well,
I know I'm talking about a little policy, and just so I don't misspeak, I'm gonna actually look.
local policy says you put a septic tank in, you can't put drain field. Says you
You
build a house in it.
you can put the tank, but you can't put the.
Yeah.
So you have to plug it up to the
But
drain.
also it goes in here and says you can't disturb the vegetation in this buffer that you've got. So how you build a house and then not disturb, you can't cut, if you build a house, now you couldn't cut your lawn. Because that's what that thing just said.
Things
So
that are.
that was a mistake, whatever's in there was a mistake.
Prohibited activities within the river stream corridor, hazardous waste, toxic waste, or solid waste landfills or C&D landfills, commercial or industrial uses that generate or involve handling hazardous or toxic materials other than waste, including in handling areas for receiving and storage of hazardous or toxic waste, quarries or intensive agricultural facilities. And then the septic drain field.
So can you not cut the grass like Roddy had suggested?
Yeah, what I'm reading,
Well,
800?
it gets a little more tricky when you consider the vegetation within the buffer. Not that you can't mow the lawn.
Well, that's what it says, you can't disturb it. I mean, that'd be mowing.
Well, it says you have to have measures in place that ensures that erosion sedimentation is maintained. And that you're,
But didn't you say earlier, Josh, that you could timber it, but it'd be kind of like
In
the
accord-
engineer, you can't.
But
cut
you
it
still
straight
gotta
up
abide by
and
the
ready.
state law.
yeah,
You guarantee.
you can timber it in accordance with best management practices established by the Georgia Forestry Commission.
Let me read this right here on page 105. Restoration of buffer. The natural vegetative buffer shall be restored as quickly as possible following any permitted land disturbance activity within the river stream corridor. And then it goes on to say you can't, you gotta maintain, you can't cut grass.
I don't interpret it that way, but maybe it says that.
That's what it says, huh?
It says, you know, once you build and disturb the soil, you get your land disturbing activity permit, then you gotta have some measures in place to ensure erosion and sedimentation is under control. And then at the end, once you're done building, you gotta go back in there and plant grass or whatever you gotta put in there, but it doesn't say you can't mow the lawn. In my mind, I don't see where it says that.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that were done wrong. And this is one of them. And Beverly did a great, super job with it, but the things that we corrected in here, but I can't live with it. Even you as a landowner, homeowner, whatever, can't live with it.
You keep saying river basin, creek basin, and small stream is not a river basin. That's two different things from creek, right? When you emphasize a river basin there, that's what it said there. Is that in there, is that river basin considered for a creek? What I call it.
No, river basin is considered larger than 150-foot buffer, probably. There's three stream orders. 1 and 2, and the 1 and 2 run together, got 3. So the third stream order's got 150 feet each side, which is 300 feet through my property. From the top of the bank, which could be 400 or 500 feet, or where the top of the bank is. So that needs to be corrected, and right here, let me read it. Natural vegetative buffer, an undeveloped area largely free from human disturbance, where naturally occurring vegetation allowed to remain undisturbed, which you can't touch grass, which is on page 103, number 4. And the river corridor contains a floor native to that area, whatever that is. I mean, you can't disturb it. That's what your ordinance says.
There you go.
I'm saying it should be correct.
You go again with the river corridor, your property on the river. You know, on the river.
Wait a minute.
I mean, you keep saying river, that's what I'm trying to get clarified.
Let me go over it one more time. You've got, and you need to look at your plat, what y'all approved. I believe your name's on here where you approved it. I'm not sure you knew what you approved, you might have. But brown and green, and brown and green, anyway, two smaller streams are 75-foot buffer each side on the top of the bank, wherever that's determined. And
You keep
then
saying
you go
that.
into a third order stream.
You keep saying that, you're talking about a small stream, and you got flat places, and your buffers gave.
Your buffer doesn't start, you get stopped that bank, wherever that bank is, according to this order. Now, and I may be going up a little bit, but then you go to the third order stream, which is 2 of those other streams run together, and you got third order, which is 150 feet each side, which is not really a river, but it's a third order stream. Now, when you get down to Broad River, you got different buffer, which I don't think it's but 100 feet, I'm not sure. or maybe 150, but whatever.
The state imposes 100 feet off of the Broad
You
River.
see the Broad River.
And the Oconee River.
And the creek, is about 550 each side, on top of the bank, wherever they did.
It's a creek, you said it's a creek.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's what I saw.
Well, that's what I would call it.
Yeah, are you familiar with, what's those two creeks with that?
South Creek.
Hobbs Creek.
Hawks Creek and, are you familiar with Hawks Creek?
Just a little bit.
And then what's the other one?
Big Cloud?
Big Cloud Creek.
All right, there's a 150-foot buffer on each one of them. Which is, you know, they call it creek. And that's from the top of the bank, wherever that's determined. Which is, I think, too much. Nobody in the state of Georgia got that, except Stourdevant County. Now, they are, let me explain this to you, because I know everybody's confused to some extent. Newton County has got like a 25-foot buffer. But now, where the rivers, creeks, or whatever flows into the water system, they got like 104 feet each side. Now, I understand that. But not going through my property with 12,000 people in the county and 414 acres, I mean 414 per mile. It just doesn't make sense. And I'm not against protecting the creeks, but that's not overprotect them at my expense. And let me read something else to you too, that you're probably not familiar with. And all these buffer deals in here, it says we're supposed to get a tax relief because we got a creek run through our property. Well, my taxes that went down, they gone up. It says relief for assessment. The assessors and boards of assessors shall consider requirements of these regulations and determine the fair market value of the land. And that's in the River and Stream Corridor Protection District. In other words, that's referring to the buffers.
I suppose you appealed your taxes then.
I did, but it didn't do anything. But I'm serious, now, hey.
But doesn't, when a creek runs through a piece of property, don't it raise the value because people might want livestock on it or whatever? I mean, if I got
Not when you got a 300-foot, or 400-foot corridor going through there you can't use. Now, you say you can build a house, well, they're gonna build a house down there and pump it, you know, that shouldn't have been in there. That wasn't the thing.
Well, you know, to make sure everybody isn't confused, let's get a little bit more clarification. The buffer you described by the state and the regulations associated with that buffer are different from the regulations and the buffers that are described by the county ordinance.
Yes. They're not disturbed. But I wonder why.
I think they recommended that we,
But I know it's confusing for you folks, because you've never been involved in this, and I have all my life, so.
and how long ago, I mean, I know that initially these buffers were 200 feet and they were revisited again. You remember how long ago that was, Roddy?
That's been 6, 7 years ago, I guess, since it revisited. It's been revisited, I know.
I've got the original, and it says 150.
Yeah.
I don't remember it being 200, might be.
I know it was revisited. We changed the,
But you had
No,
those
it's
buffers
strange.
before zoning was enacted, right?
no,
Did you have a buffer before the zoning?
it was state regulated, it had to be state controlled, because we didn't have zoning.
It's possible that what you considered was a reduction before you ever passed the zoning ordinance.
I don't think anything was revisited.
I think
before
it was-
that.
Well, I beg to differ, no agricultural was.
What was revisited was these streams that, what about streams? That was revisited, I think that was the only thing that was revisited.
Yeah. I don't think
Yeah, it was just, well, like a little plane coming on my driveway, you know, went well, so it won't be as much. We cut it back to what the other stream
And see, I'm not, let me make this point too. I'm not sure if you folks got a creek that runs through your yard, you got grass up to it. I think you gotta be 75 feet away from it, I think you gotta leave that like it is. I mean, there's some problems with this need to be corrected.
I cut mine right up to the creek. And the branch too.
I do too, I'm gonna continue to, y'all listen.
Yeah, but I can't.
I also garden down there, but it,
Josh, Roddy's talking about from the top of the, bank versus some other definition. What were those two differences?
The state uses point of resting vegetation.
Point of rested?
Resting vegetation, so I think I'd have to show you a picture and visualize it, but at some point on a stream, you don't see any more grass. But then the grass could be, or whatever growing there, could be, you know, down at the same level of the stream, kind of. And what our policy uses is once that bank goes up, where that bank breaks, that's where we start our, you know, measurement from, is a
Quick definition,
top
I
of
think
the
you
bank.
can understand, is where the water level is. That's the rest of the vegetation.
Sometimes. It
No,
all,
no, not sometimes, always. It's rested, only when it's, if you get a big rain or something, no. But I'm talking about natural flow of the stream is arrested vegetation. That's really.
it's closer to the water, that's for sure. Rest of the vegetation is closer to the water than the top of the bank. How much, it just depends on the stream itself.
Well, there'll be no questions, you got a bank straight off the bank on the side, be no question.
Let's try to water, that's right.
But like I said, if it's flattened out, the question will be there. You gotta go up here to the
But see,
bank.
rested vegetation will give you the same definition as the top of the bank is straight up.
It seemed like it was something else. If the definition, I mean, that's one of the points that you brought out, if the definition was consistent with the state in terms of point of rested vegetation,
Because that's a true line, you know, so top of the bank maybe, like I say, 100 feet out in a flat area.
well, creeks move and they leave sandbars behind and.
Well, but if they don't move, if you're in a flat area, where is the top of the bank? You know, could be 100 feet. But rested is where the flow line is. Rested vegetation is
Yeah,
where
that'd be where the stream was at that time. So that'd be where the stream's at the time.
Well, and that's right, and it could move.
Can
But
move.
rested vegetation will give you
The
a
more
true
water
line.
we had, that moving along better.
I don't personally have a problem with entertaining the idea at least of changing the definition to be consistent. Is there any issue with that?
Off the top of my head, I don't see any issue with that. It's just a different point from where it's measured.
Now, you already
Effectively
voted
make
on
those changes.
going with the state regulation. Is that, I understand that right?
Well, I told them what the planning commission made a
Yeah,
motion.
plan commission.
They wanted just to visit this, to go by the state instead of.
Study, we've done a lot of studying tonight. More studying than I thought we were gonna study. Well, huh?
I think that we should on the steady vegetation, that should be line.
I certainly don't see what I'm saying.
Well, Bill, is what, I'm trying to understand what's written down here. Is this mean that we are studying the stream buffers and it says consider alignment with the state imposed width? So that means instead of taking the buffers that we already have in Old Fork County, we consider more in getting our buffers in line with the state buffers. Is that what I'm reading?
Well, it
here?
says, yeah, study and consider.
I mean, is that what I'm understanding? Am I understanding it right, Josh?
Say again, I don't know that I understood it, to be honest with you.
Well, I got, you know, I mean,
Well, I understood that the planning and zoning don't do that, what you just said.
To
it's
get
a study.
Yeah,
You know, first of all, planning and zoning ought to be making a recommendation, not allowing us to study and make a recommendation. They should be studying and make a recommendation to us. You know, that's the way I look at planning and zoning.
They've already done it.
You got anybody left? Now, not trying to be funny, you got anybody left to make that decision?
We got 5 people left,
We got quorum.
but they're not making a decision to make a recommendation.
Well, yeah.
But to make a recommendation for us to study it
Right.
is sort of,
Okay.
I guess, sort of gives the whole idea of having the planning commission to review it.
Yeah.
Photo on the projector is from the state of Georgia, and it shows rest of vegetation, and then, you know, you measure where our policy is, top of the bank will be, up here, which I don't know how much is the distance in between here and here.
Well, I think on
Maybe
that,
that's an illustration of rest.
on the line going up to the left, the rest of the vegetation in the bank line is the same. On the right line on the right, it's not. The bank is a little further out to the right of.
Well, then that would be resident. Resident.
But that right there is creek bank like the creek at my house, it's straight down, except a little sandbar out in one little spot. All mine straight down. Walk over, you have a good little step. Not deep either. But that one would, but you're talking about more about the one that's flat.
That's
That's
right.
way out here. So I think it should be, I mean, I agree that it should be at the vegetation stop.
Well, see, that's the thing up there.
Yeah, that's
right
fine.
down.
There's no question about it. If you got two banks like that, oh, there's no question.
What else would you like to consider? I mean, that's one point.
Well, he's going to consider the, setback. Like the state. You got 150 foot, state's got 25. Right?
Pardon? I'm sorry.
On setback. From the stream.
Stream
The
buffer.
state's 25 stream buffers.
25 feet.
It's on all streams except for one going into a reservoir.
And that's the, my understanding.
Or river.
Yeah, and you need to get your man, check that out and get you satisfied with
And that's what we're looking to do is, the way I understand this is to look at the state buffers and get our county buffers more in line with the state. Which would be,
That was the same thing that was brought up before.
which would be, in some cases, which would be, I guess, to, instead of having 100 feet outside the stream, would be having, what, 50 foot, 25 foot, or 75 foot, or something like that. I mean, it's about understanding what Kelly's got written down here. I mean, fussing at you. You just wrote, well, see.
We know what the recommendation is. The recommendation is for us to study and consider getting the county's buffers consistent with the state. That's what's been recommended. We've talked about it a lot tonight, but you know, where do y'all want to go with this? Where do you want to go?
Well, I think that Josh should send us the difference in the buffers from the small stream all the way up to the river. Get us that information, then give us what the state says on each one of those, if it's the same or all of them, what it is. And then we'll go from there.
That's a lot of material. You ready for that?
Huh?
That's a lot of material. You ready for that?
No, you don't have to. I'm just talking about the buffer. I'm not talking about everything else got. I'm not like a creek in my house. All right, there's 2 or 3 branches run into it. Time that you done got the third one, so it's 150 foot. I built my house on that creek, but I built it before, so they can't do nothing about it.
When we burn down, we can't build it back.
That's right, that's right.
Man, you see See,
Again,
there's no restriction on
You
building
can build a
houses.
house in the county buffer.
Yeah, but, I can't pump it up either. I property to pump it on up
You
here.
don't have your drain field in that buffer, do you?
Well, that shouldn't be all that big a deal to get the distance, you know, I think probably got three different, you got 25 feet, you got the 100 feet going into the reservoir and the river, so that's all you need to get provided for them, I think.
I think all the creeks should be the same. All the small streams, like we call a branch, should be the same. Then when you get to the river, it should be different. I mean, like you get Little Cross Creek and Hawks Creek and whatever, they go together, that's still a creek. It don't matter, it's still a creek.
What's the other stream order, definition, Josh? You got the Strawler order, and what's the other that the state uses? The state uses a different order.
Well, they just identify three different ones. One is perennial, intermittent, and one that's just for stormwater.
Yeah, but what he's talking about, what you call that, he's talking about straddle system. What system you call that, do you know?
I don't think there's a name
I
for
don't
that
either.
system. Strawler's just a identified measurement that you are.
We use the Strawler order, but a lot of other counties don't use the Strawler order, do they?
That's correct.
And
Because
there's not another order, it's just the simple.
There may be some other ways to identify the level of stream that you're talking about. I think there's one that, see, the Strawler order starts low numbers at the headwaters. And I think there's another order that starts low numbers at the ocean and moves backwards.
Okay.
But I'm not familiar with all those.
One that we use on this is the most stringent. I do
Well,
know.
I mean, I don't know how stringent they are, it's just a little bit confusing for me.
Well, yeah, and me too, but the thing about it is, what they use on this is the most stringent. In other words, when two creeks run together, that's third order. So, but there's a different system that don't go up in order that fast.
I'm just asking this as a question. How come, and we'll, at this board, we're doing Oglethorpe County, how come we can't just go along with the state buffers and let that be it? And if there ever comes a time when we get so much going on in the county that it needs readdressing, it can be addressed. I mean, what I'm saying is if this is the state regulations and there's so many other counties that don't have as stringent laws as we do, then why don't we just go along with what the state has and let that do it? I mean, that's not a recommendation, that's just a question. I mean, I
wanted to know what could be permitted in these buffers and what couldn't be, because I want to know what the value of it is. In my mind, everybody's got a different opinion about what's valuable. Wait a minute. Everybody's got a different opinion about what's valuable, what isn't valuable. I asked Josh, what's permitted in there and what is not permitted in there. What he told me wasn't permitted in there was some things that probably don't need to be permitted in there. You probably don't need hazardous waste sites there. I mean, those are things that I think, and if that's the only thing we're not permitting in there, and I'm not saying that is, but that is some of the things that I don't think need to be permitted in there. And if we can extend that so that we're not worried about that, that's fine. A good friend of mine had a business right up there on Lincoln Drive, and he was right next to a creek. He had a chemical business, and he handled hazardous waste. If you remember, that creek was condemned for a number of period of time. And that wouldn't have existed in Oglethorpe County. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that because I think that I want to hang my hat on that and that only, but there are some positive things about what he had to say about these things. And I think that's one of them. Now, if it's violating my right to build a house inside that buffer, I don't like that. My wife will tell you, we've got a place on the creek, it's a nice place to build a house, and if it's telling me I can't build there, I don't like that idea. So, I got mixed emotions, but to sit here and say that there's no value and that we need to be like everybody else, I don't want to be like the Olympic Drive situation where we can, create an environment where the creek will be contaminated. So, if that's the only thing, it's restricted. Or if it's that and other things that aren't really harsh and hard to deal with. But it's really the opinion of all these people sitting right here, and all those people sitting out there, and all those people we represent. It's not my opinion, it's not Roddy's opinion, it's not any one of our individual opinions. It's a collective opinion of all of us.
Can I say something?
Yes, sir.
Well, everything's prohibited in there, you wouldn't want anyway. I mean, you're looking at hazardous waste, toxic waste, where you want that in the county? That's what's prohibited. Our solid waste landfill, our construction and demolition landfill,
Keep reading.
things, so that's it. So
You
you.
look at a couple of other things, intensive agriculture.
Pardon?
Intensive agriculture, you don't want to chickenize agriculture.
Yeah, well, it don't say it here, but it's in there
It's
somewhere.
not.
Yeah.
But,
Look on the next page.
Look on the next page.
yeah, okay, right, in district, yeah. You're right. Well, see, in somewhere in here, you can't fertilize your soil with chicken manure too, with 150 feet of the creek. You know, it's,
Is that not permitted in that?
That's correct. And the same one as intensive agriculture, says intensive agricultural
too
facilities.
intensive. I'm not against ordinance, but I think it would need something we can
This is
listen
all-
with to. And,
Academic
you know,
research.
whether it affects me or not, it affects the farmers. And that's whether it affects me personally or not, it affects our farmers, and we're a farming community. Well,
But that's what I say, Roddy. I mean, there are things we certainly don't want anywhere. I don't think all of those things, might not necessarily apply, but there's certain things you don't want right there next to a stream.
true.
And if you can eliminate that by having that buffer, and not affect everything else, and not affect everything else, it doesn't matter to the community as a
Something
whole,
real.
then that should
Something
be
real. I
okay.
think we're all talking about that.
Now, if all the things that we don't want, are in there, and all the things that we, do want aren't in there, then everything's good, but trying to figure out what those things are
Yeah.
is the key. But to eliminate the possibility of putting a chemical site next to a major stream,
Oh, yeah, well, you.
by having this buffer, or eliminating that buffer and creating
Well,
that.
see, the buffer don't really have anything to do with that, because you're not gonna allow it anyway, without a reasonable distance from the creek. I mean, it's not just the buffer allowed or not allowed, in my opinion. But now, let me make this statement. A buffer is a buffer is a buffer. Now, definition of a buffer, you can't do anything in it. Now, you might allow somebody to build a house during this administration, next administration might not. But a buffer is a buffer is a buffer. It's a buffer. It's not-
Well, it ain't the
No, it's
administration,
not.
especially if it's done correctly, it's not the administration. If it's done correctly, it's by whatever the ordinance allows. Now, the administration can change the ordinance.
And that's what I'm saying, yeah. Yeah. But, yeah. I think we're on the right track.
So if I guess to study it, we'd have to actually study what's permitted in there, that's okay, and what's not permitted in there that we don't want to see.
Well, in my
Or,
opinion,
and to say, if we want to eliminate, if you say, hey, everything that's in there, that we say we don't want to have in there, we don't really care about, just do away with it. But I think it's only under those circumstances that you want to eliminate it. Otherwise, just
no, I
massage.
don't think you need to eliminate the buffer, I'm not proposing that.
I'd be in favor of changing buffers and looking at each individual zone and say a chemical plant, where do it come in? You got to have certain setbacks for them.
All right. I guess the only thing I know to do at this point, we've talked about it, it's been a very limited dialogue, there's been just a few of us talking. We want to get a committee to study and make a recommendation to the board, I think that'd be the most effective way to do that. Is there at least two of you who'd like to serve on a committee to review this ordinance?
What are we reviewing the ordinance?
So you're gonna save us all, the time of doing the study. You're gonna study the stream buffers and consider whether or not you want to really change these things, or eliminate.
I don't think we want to eliminate that.
if there's no one willing to serve on those committees, then I wanna know exactly what you wanna do as far as this being an action item, because I think if it comes before this board as an agenda item, it's not gonna go away. It's been sort of out there, and we need to address it, and we need to deal with it and be done with it, one way or the other.
I reiterate what I said. I think that Josh needs to give us a distance from the smallest stream to the largest stream on the buffer. And we'll go from there. And I think we're all in agreement that the line should start from vegetation line, not the bank. We all agree, but I think, and I think that's the biggest thing is what ours is and what the state's is. That's what I like to compare. That's all. I mean, not, you know, if you tell me that, say, the first stream that is 25 foot, that's an intermittent, right? 25 foot on the intermittent.
Stated, yeah.
That's one that runs part-time, part-time north. Then it goes up from there. And draw us a map, the intermittent, and the first stream, and going into the second stream, and what the bubbles are till it gets to.
It'd be difficult to do. Well, I don't know.
Maybe to draw on a piece of paper,
But you're talking about just an example.
Just an example, that's all. Just
But I think you need to take an example of existing waterway, just to see how that looks. So take one small stream, and go from there all the way to the
Right.
Oconee River, the Broad River, and just see what that really looks like. What do you think?
I need that.
Give you a visual,
Yeah,
give you an
that's
understanding of
what-
what we're really talking about here.
We'll know what each step is.
You can use one right by my house, that's darn near the headwaters of that whole system. Or you can use one right over here on William Pope, that is the headwaters to Long Creek. That's where it starts, right there, as you turn on William Pope. Start right there at that headwater, follow it all the way down, all the way down to, and we'll just see what the effect of that is.
We didn't want
You
to
wanna
go to
see
the river.
one?
I want one to go to the river. I mean, so you go.
Well, it will, it'll go from it'll hit from right there, that stream, to Long
Yeah.
Creek, down to Broad River.
I just like to see what the distance on each phase of it, every time you run the two together.
See how
What
it
changes, what changes.
And it's not every time you run two together, so you can have a lot of first order streams come together.
you
You won't reach a third order until two second orders go together. So you gotta have a whole bunch of first orders coming into a second order. You won't reach, but I can give you a visual of all that.
That's
what
what
show
gets
off
confusing
first
to me is all, you know, how do you determine how many first orders is there before you get in that second order, and then, I mean, I know you gotta have two first orders, but man, it just, I guess you could, let's just do that every day. It's just hard to imagine what the real,
I mean, I have a map that does that function, so it tells me what order string it is.
okay. So you do that, give us a visual, we can think about this more, we've all learned a lot. If you can share any information on buffers with all of us, with Kelly, and she'll redistribute it to every one of us, we can learn more about it and make some more informed decisions. We get,
Bring this up at the next work session.
I think that's, at the earliest, we'll talk about it again at the next week. No action items next week. Is there anything else about this? Well, I think it's some good discussion. I appreciate everybody's patience. Number 5 is the sign ordinance recommendation from the planning commission. As you know, we had a request from the church to change the sign ordinance, and we appointed a committee. It really got to be a really big task, and I guess, Josh, you can give us an update on what that.
Yeah, I'll just read to you from the minutes of the meeting. Chairman Rossiani assigned a committee to look at the sign ordinance as it applies to churches. That committee was made of Walter Britton, Danny Sanders, Beverly Montgomery, and myself. And the committee assigned to recommend changes after in-depth evaluation of the ordinance, decided that a major rewrite was necessary and beyond the intent of the committee. And the chairman decided to table the sign ordinance issue and revisit the issue at a more appropriate time with representation from the community and both commissions being board commissioners, elected officials as well as appointed officials. And they also stated that new policy, including the sign ordinance, should be considered after the adoption of the new future development map and the outcome of the T-Splosh referendum in July.
So is it a standstill?
It really just doesn't leave you an opportunity for a variance in that policy. It is at a standstill, it's complex, it shouldn't be that complex. To me, it shouldn't be that complex.
We thought it would be an easy fix at first, but as soon as we got talking about it, as soon as the committee got talking about it, it got real complicated real quick.
Again, I'd love to see an out, not an out, but what you call it, a review committee that can look at these things and make the decision. And I know it's not in there now, but I think it could be written in a way that you can make practical use. The problem I got with the sign ordinance is it's based on, I guess, one vision of how signs should or shouldn't be. And I think that vision changes dramatically from one end of our county to the other end of our county. Our county is very diverse, and there's some places where that vision might fit, and there's some places where that vision is just way out there. You know, so it's a one standard look at how things should be done, but I think that depending on where you're at in this county, it may or may not apply. And I'd love to be able to see something that was more consistent with the diversity of the county. How do you do that? I don't know. I think one of the ways you do consider doing that is getting a district commissioner involved, much like you would in this review committee, so that they can make a recommendation, and they can have some input as to what's consistent, what's good inside that district, the district that they know and represent, versus what might not be good somewhere else. I don't know if that's ultimately the answer, but I think to have an effective sign ordinance, you're going to have one. It just needs to be, it needs to have some flexibility, it needs to have some representation with some influence from wherever that is being considered. I think if you look at Arnoldville Road, where they're looking at making the initial complaint come from, initial request came from, that's a little bit different than probably the middle of Crawford, the middle of Lexington. Probably a little bit different from the middle of Beaverton. So it ain't a whole lot different. You know, if you go down to the best, I can tell you, you're gonna find very few people who really care what size that sign is.
One of the objectives of the future development map is to identify those areas in the county which are different from each other. And I think it will be helpful, that product will be helpful in applying some of these policies in the right places.
I think you got district representation on this board of commissioners, and who should be better to know what the pulse of that community is than these district representatives? If they're not, they got something called an election that happens once every 4 years, so they have to fix it.
What does this decision got to do with the T-Splosh and future development map? What's this decision on the sign got to do with that? Were they not, what my understanding is, they didn't make a decision, waiting on that to happen. Well, once this gets done, they're gonna wait on something else to happen. I mean, you still need a sign.
The result of the T-Splosh referendum is soon to be
That don't have anything to do with a sign.
a divided highway in Ellsworth County, which we don't currently have. And the reason that applies to the sign is because speeds and the amount of time, speed limits and the amount of time that you have to view a sign and the distance that it is from the road, all are considerations in the size and height of the sign. And so having a divided highway or not having a divided highway is a consideration, and not knowing whether we're gonna have one or not is something that we consider.
And I don't disagree with that, but that T-Splosh passed on July 31st or whenever it is, 10 years before you'll have a divided highway. I mean, that's state highway.
Actually,
Kind of
it would be 6 years, but you're right. But you could base the policy on whether it passed, whether it did pass. Just
Sure.
a divided highway, speculate that that's exactly where it's gonna be. So, yeah.
So I think.
I think Billy's idea of having it where you can some way of, you know, well, David can recommend something in his district because he's in touch with those people, me, all of them the same way, you know, it's just like Billy said, you know, you go out and in Vestal, you're gonna have folks out there that got a whole lot of different opinion about what's out in that area than you can have like in Arnoldville.
You
And
know,
I think that's the key right there, what you just said about that.
I got a question. Did this committee talk to a sign, a professional to see? You know, I hear y'all talk about the road now, but a professional sign maker could answer a lot of these questions. And I think if, in the future, they need to talk to a professional, so I don't know if they did or not.
I don't know about talking to a professional, but
Or have input.
we got products that were created by professionals, either from the Sign Association of the, United States Sign Association, whatever it's called, or Department of Community Affairs puts out some publications. And we did reference those, and we've got, a whole library of stuff that.
They can tell you how big a sign should be, how
Yeah.
far back it should be, or whatever to read it and all that.
And I think you're on the right track, but I think in place to talk to a sign man, you need to talk to somebody that does ordinances for the counties. I mean, they know what they're doing, they know what they've done in the past with other counties and all that, and the sign man is gonna sell you something. But you need to talk to somebody that's
Again, we referenced a wide variety of products, and it just became something broader than what the committee was put together for. But to address yours, I think it would just be important on just deciding how to administer that, because now every sign permit that comes in, I gotta bring it to a committee. I mean, that's just hard, that's just difficult to administer for me.
But are there those? I mean, we're not really talking about everyone that comes in, we're talking about all those that don't currently fit the criteria.
Okay.
Because, and really, the way I look at that is, as long as I've been on here, we only entertained one. You know, the one for Larry McFall, the one that didn't meet the guidelines. That's the only one that we really need to look at and say, either this makes sense or it doesn't make sense.
Since then, there were several other churches that called in, but,
Okay. But I think that if you decide that Larry McFall, Bobby represents that area right now. If they call Bobby and say, Bobby, we're gonna put a big sign out there, we make it all make sense, He's part of a review committee, so to speak, that says, that's consistent with Arnoldville, that makes good sense. You might, Dave might have one down there at Sunlight, and they wanna do something, the exact same thing. He said, well, that really ain't consistent with what's going on right here at Sunlight, because that's a little different, more concentrated or whatever. But I think that they got to focus on what people really want in that area more than anything. And it's just those unique situations where it doesn't currently fit what you got there. And I'm not saying that it's exactly right, maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but you need to have an opportunity to amend that. There is no opportunity to get a variance or amendment. And that's really, I think, the biggest thing we're lacking right now. If you look at it, y'all spent tons of time, I know you did, because I saw you there every day when I would leave, spending time on it. But you spend tons of time on it, but really it should be something pretty simple that we could fix. Even if it went for the whole board of commissioners or the planning commission, just give them an out for somebody to look in there and review that. And then ultimately, the board of commissioners can say, well, this is in David's district. David, we're gonna entertain a motion. Would you like to make that motion? I think we're all appreciative of each other's districts and follow the lead. But even if it was as simple as that, it would still make more sense than we just need an opportunity to do the right thing without having to reinvent the wheel.
as you insert, discretion from whether it's elected officials or appointed officials, discretion into the decision-making process, we just need to be sure to not avoid arbitrary, capricious decisions, because that can get us into some legal difficulties. And the more you insert discretion into procedures, it opens you up to that possibility. That's the only comment I'd make about having.
And I get that and understand and appreciate it, but at the same time, if you don't have some discretion, then you really don't need to have a board of commissioners. And you don't need to have a voting member of a voting governing body. You just gotta trust that they're not gonna make capricious decisions.
I think also on that same line, if the planning commission cannot come to a conclusion on it, pass it on to the board of commissioners, let them make that decision. That would solve the whole problem.
And you need a zoning board of appeals, do you have that? Never mind.
I mean, something like that sign, that church sign. up
Both
there.
zoning board of appeals, there is technically a zoning board of appeals, it hasn't been exercised, but
I mean, you need that, everybody needs the opportunity.
But there's no opportunity to be denied right now. I mean, so you can't appeal for something you can't be denied for, that's
Well,
gonna.
if I want a zoning and y'all turn it down, I don't have zoning board of appeals. Do I?
Well, but you're not asking for a zoning change here, you're asking for a sign.
No, okay, well, we're talking about that.
Yeah, we are.
Well, that would solve this situation.
What?
Well, the board of appeals have a sense too.
When the board of planning commission can make a decision like on this deal with the church, send it on to the board of commissioners and we can make the decision.
Well,
It's
it
like
doesn't-
somebody bypassing planning and zoning.
it doesn't give you an opportunity to change it, Bobby, that's the problem. It don't give you an opportunity for a variance.
You just grant that variance without that.
You have to have a minimum reason for a variance, and there has to be identifiable reasons.
Just grant it. Grant the sign request is all you could be doing. I don't know how you're gonna come up with
Well, again, that gets to be those arbitrary and capricious. Help me out here, Josh. Capricious decisions. Where you're doing for one, you're not doing for the other, you're doing one against the whole, what everything says there. I think you just need to give yourself that opportunity to make those decisions. And just think about it, our population density goes from probably 500 per square mile to 3 per square mile. There are different decisions made in those different areas.
Well,
You can say that they're arbitrary and capricious, but they're really just logical for the area that they're in.
well, an example would be, right now, our church is considering changing the parking lot. And I'm on the board we had a meeting just a couple of weeks ago, we talking about the sign. Had a guy there that, I can't remember what company he's from, but you know, he's making a plan for the whole church for the future. And that's one thing he said about when we was talking about the sign. He said that, you know, coming down 22, he said, now, you know what Josh said about the speed of people and how big the sign needed to be for that particular road at this time, and, you know, as far into the future as he can see. And that makes, you know, that what you said about having it where you can kind of get your district commissioner to give some input on that makes sense, you know. And then, like you said, the same thing would be if church up there in Arnoldville somewhere was doing the same thing we are, and the same man and the same company was recommending for them, you know, he would have a different recommendation because where they at, they might want to do it a little different. Well,
Yeah.
Bobby or somebody would be a little more in tune with that. And I really agree, I agree with that, and the reason I'm saying that is because I mean, you know, I know what we're thinking about doing, so.
Well, I think we ought to plug that one in there with the other consideration and talk about it in our next meeting. You know, that's gonna happen otherwise. The committee is basically debunked right now, so, you know, in the absence of starting a new committee, we just have to talk about it. I think there's been some good dialogue. We can sort of digest what we talked about and talk about it again, you know, and I think we can come up with something. No further questions on that, and we'll move on. And that is the last item on the agenda. One thing I did want to update you on, well, a couple things. We did get a public defender contract and agreement forwarded to us by Norman that suggests we pay $30 more per month in the judicial circuit with Madison, Hart, Elbert, and Franklin County. Our option is to hire our own public defender, which is unfortunately more expensive than that. I don't really like the idea, but what I would like for you guys to consider is you're welcome to look at the whole contract, as far as I'm concerned. It's the same contract, it's a different price tag. But I think that we ought to consider passing it, but I think we ought to pass it contingent on everybody else, 100% of the remainder of the 5 counties, being Hart, Madison, Elbert, and Franklin, passing it as well. If they, any of them abstain, then our offer will be off the table. So what I would suggest to you, continue to talk about this, is that we do grant it, but it's based on everybody else, a unanimous passes by everybody else. If they're not gonna pay their fair share, I don't think they're gonna pay ours either. I guess. So. Any questions about that?
When's that come take, the July one?
Well, it's for their July budget. And then ours isn't gonna change, ours is gonna be the same, we're gonna get the same amount of money between,
July, January.
they're gonna be 6 months out anyway, for next year. Any questions about that? Not, we'll move on to the final item, just want to give you an update. Early in the year, we did take our accumulated credits and put those towards paying down our unfunded liabilities for our retirement plan. And as a result of that, I'm pleased to report that instead of paying 11.6% per employee for our employer contributions as a percent of payroll, we are now down to 5.7% of payroll per employee with the same benefits. And again, we have, and I appreciate this board and appreciate the previous boards who made the decision to start. You know, we wrote the checks, but the decision was actually made before this administration to go ahead and pay that money down, and I think it's paid off now. And again, we've gone from 11.6% of payroll down to 5.7% of payroll. Give you an idea how much money that is. We went from our total annual contributions from 184,906 to 95,444. So that's some of the money that will hopefully help us make up the shortfall and decrease digest. So again, I appreciate that. Just want to give you a report on it. Anything else for the good of the county?